Hello, everyone. Dr. Shabazz here, and I'm going to give you a review for the exam. And I want to also talk about the quiz that you took. I'm sure you all will want to know about that. I have graded the quizzes. You probably have seen the grades up, and I did want to talk about those briefly. Well, maybe not so brief. I'll go through some materials and just to ensure that you understand it. I did notice some patterns in terms of indecision. And so on this exam coming up on Tuesday, you want to make sure that you go into the exam with a game plan and that your mind is clear and that you have your method and your procedures and your techniques down. That way, when you're on the exam, you won't get confused and start having bouts of indecision. Also, I might add that you want to make sure that you don't fall into this habit of being lazy and just trying to coast through the exam. We have faculty members, we talk about what has been the difference between in-person and online, and it's a lot easier to drift and even perhaps get help during the exam. We have had problems with students using materials, collaborating, going on GroupMe, and all of these things. And I've talked about this before, and I won't belabor the point. But what is happening is that students, when we finally go back to the classroom permanently, students will have picked up some very bad habits. And so you want to make sure that you don't get into that rut of getting relaxed in terms of your study regimen. You want to still hit the books. I know this is online and maybe students don't take it as seriously, but of course, it's the same grade. You get the same grade as you would if you were doing the in-person. So make sure you take this seriously. And with regard to this exam, I used to call this my high-low exam. I don't know if I want to continue calling it the high-low, but in these types of exams, there's calculations. So either your calculations are right or they're wrong. If you use a wrong formula or if something is inverted, then you're going to get the answer wrong. So if you're using the same technique for all of your questions, then all of your questions or all of your answers will be incorrect. So want to make sure that you're clear, you're well rested, you go in with confidence, and then you knock out the exam. There will be at least one question where you'll actually have to write out your answer in kind of a short answer format. And I might have at least one, maybe two of those where you have to kind of express yourself a bit. And I think this is good because then you're able to express what is not in the multiple choice answers. And a lot of times students are restricted because they're limited to the answers that are there. They may understand it a totally different way. And so I want to add that as one of the elements in terms of assessing your analytical ability. So let me take you to the quizzes. There were two different quizzes, and I will share the screen. I have these quizzes side by side, and so you'll have a chance to see them both. Okay, so you should be seeing this very large screen. I have a lot of different windows open. I'll just expand this a bit. So these were the two quizzes. I'm actually going to try to make it a little bigger. And if you'll note, these were just the questions were inverted. As you can see here, for this one, traveling from Italy, going to the UK. This is traveling from the UK, going to Italy. So the answers are going to be very different. I noticed that on the quiz, some of you had the other one, which mean that you probably used the wrong cross rate, or you probably used the wrong columns. I actually furnished you with a chart, and that chart was supposed to be what you used in order to get the rates. So this would have been the currency chart that I gave you, and you were to get your rates from here. Now, for the quizzes, I only gave you 3 of these, and the idea is that you are taking an amount of currency, and I went over this in class on Thursday, so I won't go over it in great detail because I've already done this, but having done the exam, I just want to make sure everything is clear so that when you go into the exam, you don't have any confusion. You have a set of currency, or an amount of currency that you're trying to figure out the value of in the country you're traveling to. On currency quiz A, you have 5,000 euros. You're in Italy, and you're going to, let's say it's London, and you're going to change that 5,000 euros into pounds. In quiz B, as you can see, you have 5,000 pounds. You're going to Italy, you're going to change those into euros. So before you can have an idea of the exchange rate, or what it would require for an amount of currency to be converted into the other currency, you have to have what? You have to have an exchange rate table, right? Now, if you look at this is the actual website here, X-rates. Now, if I'm converting euros, now this is as of today. If you were normally doing this, you could just put 5,000 here. Then you can put British pound here. And you can hit currency calculator and it'll give you the amount. Very easy. And you can do this with any number, any currency. And the good thing about this is with the rates table, you can denominate the rates table into any other currency. But in our case, I gave you a chart that is fixed in time, and you have to use the numbers here. So in the first case, you have the euro, which you're going to exchange. Now, I said that you need an exchange rate. So in all exchange rates, there's always a 1. So I'm the one traveling in quiz A to London. So if I'm traveling, I want to know what the exchange rate is. And the exchange rate says always a 1. So I want to know how much 1 euro is equal to in pounds. So given this table, I'm using the dollar. This is called the vehicle currency. The vehicle currency. I'm going to use this because I know that on this chart, I have a common denominator, which is the dollar. And that common denominator can be used to find out what the ratio is between any two currencies on the chart. So in this case, and I did this before in class, you have your dollar equivalents that you put here. So again, if both of these are equal to $1, then they're equal to each other. These amounts are equal to each other. So now you have a ratio. You have a par value between the euro and the pound. But I want to know what? How much one unit of my currency is equal to in England, because if I know how much one is equal to, I'll know how much 5,000 are equal to. So in this case, if I want to know how much one is equal to, then what do? I make this side a 1, right? And ultimately, that means dividing both sides by this amount. Now, in real life, you won't be doing this on your calculator, but we'll do it on the calculator because we want to see what the relationship between the two currencies are and how they're related and how they're related to other currencies. So in this situation, if I divide both sides by this, then that cancels out to 1. That will be 1 euro equals, pardon me, 0.720906 divided by 0.829356. And this is the number I'm getting in order to find out how much 1 euro is equal to in England. So 1 euro equals 0.8692, so on and so forth, British pounds. Now, here's one thing that when you're calculating, you will get a long answer like this as a result of finding the cross rate. If your calculator automatically truncates digits, you have some computers that'll chop it off at 4 digits. You want to turn that off your calculator. You want to turn it off, and you want these digits to go out as far as the computer has capacity. And the reason for that is you want greater accuracy. Now, if we're looking at this, and I'll actually give you an example of why that's so important, but we found our cross rate. 1 euro equals this amount of pounds. So if I know how much 1 is equal to, I know how much 5,000 are equal to. I just multiply it by 5,000. And I have the answer, which you see there on the right. Now notice I did cut, for my final answer, I did cut it off to 2 decimal places. And I have all of these here, but I've cut it off to 2 decimal places. 2 decimal places is generally what you're going to be dealing with because that's how money is issued. On this currency chart, they use even 6 digits. And again, that is to maintain the accuracy of this chart, of the currency figures. So here they use 6 digits. You may see in some places where they're using 4 because you're talking about basis points, the movement of basis points, which is the movement of currency values. Okay, so that's how those were done. Now notice for this one, I actually noticed people getting confused on this one, and they probably were looking around on the chart for the US dollar and figuring out where on the chart is the US dollar. I don't see it on here. Well, you won't see it on here because you won't see the US dollar in this column but you'll see it here because, of course, $1 is equal to $1. There's no need to have it on the on the column because it's equal to itself. And so all you do here is you want to know how much $1 is equal to in Switzerland. So you just go to this column here. You go down to Swiss franc, which is 0.896198. If you know how much $1 is equal to in Switzerland, you know how much 2,750 are equal to. You just multiply it and you come out with this answer. All right, so that's how those are done. Here, a lot of people got crossed up on this one. Again, as I said Thursday, this is a logical exercise. You have to think about these currencies in relation to the dollar. You're not just looking at these numbers or this number and comparing it with this number and saying, okay, that's two more than that, then it appreciated. That's not how that's read. The way this is read is that you have this currency that is paired with this currency in November. Then you have this currency, which is the dollars, compared with this currency in December. Two different quotes. So you're comparing the two quotes against each other. You're not comparing these numbers with each other. So if we look at this logically, we can look at it from two ways. We can look at it from the US standpoint. We can look at it from the Jamaican standpoint. If an American goes to Jamaica and says, I want to exchange my $1 for Jamaican, the exchange clerk in the Kingston airport, Norman Manley International Airport, would say that will be 130 Jamaican that you're owed, right? That $1 will get you 130 Jamaican. Now, let's say next month you're coming back to Jamaica and you ask the same question. I have $1. I want to exchange this for Jamaican currency. They would say that will be 132 Jamaican that we're going to give you. So my dollar has appreciated. This has gotten stronger because I get two more Jamaican dollars than I got a month earlier. So in this, I am asking about the Jamaican dollar. And it really doesn't matter what symbol is there. There, you just know I'm talking about another currency. I could have any other funny symbol there, and we're still talking about the other currency, whatever that other currency is. So if the dollar has appreciated in this time frame, in this 30-day time frame, then the Jamaican dollar has inversely depreciated. To look at it from the Jamaican side, if I'm Jamaican in November, I come to the United States and I say, I want to buy $1 of currency. They will say, sir, that will be 130 Jamaican. November, I will give them 130 Jamaican. I come back the next month, come back to the same clerk and say, I want to buy $1. They will say, sir, that will be 132 Jamaican a month later. So what has happened? I have to now pay more Jamaican dollars for the same dollar. A month earlier, it was only 130. Now it's 132. It cost me 132. So the Jamaican dollar has depreciated. It has gone down in value. That's the way you look at it. You're looking at currencies in relation to one another. You're not just looking at this number here as an absolute that we see. You're looking at these currencies in relation to the dollar. So if one appreciates, the other depreciates. If one depreciates, the other appreciates. So they're inversely related. And that is the same with all the others. For these, all you had to do was find one of those tables and look up the the currency codes. There are many different types of charts. I think some of you told me you Googled, but there are all kinds of charts that you can look at that will give you this information here. I'm not sure if I'm going to have any of these on the exam, but certainly these are fairly easy to find. And what I wanted you to do is I wanted you just to explore, and I wanted you to find this information. So that way you'll be exposed to other concepts as well, and also other currencies in the process of you looking. So for this, in terms of currency pair, I sent you a link, and that link, I believe it was Investopedia for currency pair. If you clicked on that link, it would have taken you here. Some of you said you didn't know how it worked, and you just have to read this. Again, I gave you some things that you had to do in order to understand the concept. So here, you basically just have to read this page. And you could have looked at the video. You could have read this section of understanding currency pairs. And then down here, they have explanation as to what it means. And even you find here, the way you read the quote, the EUR/USD equals 125 means that €1 exchanged for $1.25. And so that's how it's read. The first code is the 1, and after that you have USD 125. So that means €1 equals 125. Now, where some of you got confused, actually you had to use the chart in order to find out the value. And of course, I did give you the chart. So for those, you had to find the code first, because you just did that up here for some other countries. And you would find the rupiah, but this is 1 rupiah equals a certain amount of dollars. So always the first code is the 1. So where do you find that? We know that this is $1 equals a certain amount of rupiah. This is 1 rupiah equals a certain amount of US currency. And so this is the answer here. 1 rupiah equals 0.000071. That would be the answer. So for USD to Great Britain, that's this column. USD, 1 USD to NPR, that's also this column. The Qatari Rial, 1 Qatari Rial equals 0.274725 US dollars, which is what you find here. And lastly, the Hungarian forint, which you will find here, is equal to 0.003358. 1 Hungarian forint is equal to 0.003358. And so that's all you had to do. You had to find out what a currency pair is. You had to find out the symbol, and then you had to know how to use the chart. So there were a few things that you had to know how to do on that one. Many of these are simply questions that you would have known already, or you would have looked up. The Bretton Woods Conference is, that has been in the book, that has also been in materials that you have seen, most notably Life and Debt, and also a video I will share with you in this session after I complete this quiz and go over some briefing of the other chapters. This question here was also a similar question. You're taking a certain amount of currency, in this case 200 US, before you find out how much you get in euros, you need to find out what the exchange rate is. Here, you already have the exchange rate, right? This is the exchange rate you're dealing with. So if $1 is equal to 0.67 euros, then how much are 200 equal to? Again, that's just a multiple. So that's point, you multiply it, 0.67 equals 134. They gave you 132. You're supposed to get 134. They gave you 2 less than expected. So again, that's the same type of problem. You're trying to convert one set of currencies to the other. For this one, you had and there are a couple of different ways to do it, but one of the ways you may have learned it is new minus old over old. So you have here the new rate, which is 1 to 5. This is the old rate, 1 to 3, over 3. So 5 minus 3 over 3, which is 2 over 3, which is 0.66, which is 66% increase. How do we know it's not a decrease? Now, we just learned that for US currency, a percentage change in US currency. So we're looking at the dollar. We know that now the dollar is stronger because we get more Kwanzaas for the dollar. So we know it's a positive. And we just did in our head that it was 66%. So that's positive 66% that the dollar has increased. Now, if you want to know what has happened to the Kwanzaa, now we know the Kwanzaa has depreciated. That answer is not up here. But if we were doing Kwanzaa, we wanted to know the percentage change in the Kwanzaa, you would take the inverse of everything in that equation. So if it's 5 minus 3 over 3, it would be 1 over 5 minus 1 over 3 over 1 over 3. So that would be 1 over 5 is 0.20. 1 over 3 would be 0.33 with a bar over it, over 0.33 with a bar over it. And then that would get you an answer. So if we did that, let's say that's 0.20 minus 0.33, that would be minus 0.13 divided by 0.33 would be approximately 40%. So the percentage change of the Kwanzaa has depreciated -40, or it has depreciated 40%. And notice it's not quite 40% because I did truncate some digits. It would have been 0.20 minus 0.333 going all the way until it runs out, divided by 0.3 all the way across as far as it goes. And then you get closer to, you get basically minus 40. And you can see how chopping off digits will affect the outcome. So those are the issues when you're dealing with these types of calculations. In this question, you have a situation where you've paid $50 for a meal in New York, and you want to know what has occurred. This is also a very simple problem. You essentially have to find out how much 8,000 yen are. You have the exchange rate here, and you essentially divide it by 110, and you get $72.72. So this meal is $22 more expensive in Japan than it is in New York. One of the tricks that I mentioned before, and again, these are the same these are the same questions as far as these two quizzes are concerned, but all the others are different. I gave you a trick. So if you're looking at how to calculate or what operation to use, if you're trying to convert a certain amount of currency to something else, you look at the amount that you're converting, you look at the sign or what currency you're converting, that's a yen. With the exchange rate, all exchange rates have a 1. You look at the 1, you look at the currency beside it. If these currencies are different, and they are, you divide. If these currencies are the same, then you multiply. That is going to be the rule for what operation to use if you're trying to convert an amount of currency with a given exchange rate. So then in this case, this 1, you look at the 1, you look at the symbol beside it, that's a dollar. You look at what you're trying to exchange, that's a yen, so you divide. If this was $8,000, then you multiply. You multiply because that would tell you how many yen you would get, and it would be quite a number. What would that would be? If we were calculating to yen instead of dollars, that would be equal to 880,000 yen. But this is 8,000 yen. You look at the symbol, and in that case, you divide. And that tells you how many dollars 8,000 yen are equal to. You compare that with $50, the meal was cheaper in the US. In this case, we have an exchange rate, $1 equals 49. What is a quick way of finding how much one dalasi is equal to in US currency? And essentially here, the Gambia is not on this chart, but if it was, we're now talking about this column over here. We already know that if the Gambia was here in this column, it would be 49 here. But we're interested in knowing how much one dalasi is worth in US. So a quick way to do it, and I told you this before, is just simply to take the inverse. So the inverse of 49 is this. So that's a quick way, is use this 1/x button. And you will know how much one dalasi gets you in the US. For the last question, this one gave many of you problems. I already gave you the currencies here, so you were supposed to use these currencies and not go to the chart. This is part of the problem. So you get 2 quotes. So this is a British student. So apparently he's looking at a British source and he notices these 2 quotes. But he's going to France. But he has dollars on him. He has 700 US dollars. So one way to do it is using these exchange rates. You take the $700 and you convert to pounds. And you look at the exchange rate from pounds, from 1 pound equals a number of $1.52 US. So this is 700. Now, if I want to convert this to pounds, what did I just say? You want to convert this? You look at the sign by the 1, that's a pound. So what is the operation? The operation is that you divide if they're different. So here you have a division. That means $700 equals 460.5263 pounds. That's the first step. Then you take that amount of currency in pounds and you use this exchange rate. 1 pound equals 1.16 euros. So if you know how much 1 pound is equal to, then how much are 460.5263? Now, in that case, it is a multiple. In that case, it is a multiple. You're converting this into euros with this exchange rate. If 1 pound is equal to 1.16, then how much are 460? And so then you get this answer. Majid did not have enough to buy that ticket. Whereas in the other one, notice that you have two different exchange rates here. You have two different exchange rates, sets of exchange rates. So in this one, Majid could not afford the ticket because he only had 534 when he needed 590. Now notice the difference between the two currency rates here. The British pound in this situation is a bit weaker. It's a bit weaker than it was previously. And the pound is a bit stronger than it was before. But the good thing for us is we're not trying to convert pounds, we're trying to convert dollars, which is the difference. So while the pound depreciated, in the second case, the dollar appreciated. And since I'm trying to convert dollars, that's a good thing for me. So the first calculation, since my dollar appreciated, that means that instead of 460 pounds, it's now 510. It's looking pretty good. So then I take the 510 and using this exchange rate, I now have enough. So take those pounds. 1 pound is equal to 1.17. Then how much are 510? So I have 597 euros, and I have enough to buy the ticket. There's another way you could have done this with the cross rate. Some of you did it this way. And what you have here is the $700. And then you have a cross rate between the euro and the pound. You're ultimately going 2 euros from pounds. And so using this rate, this tells you what? How much 1 pound is equal to in euro. That's the amount here. And you get those amounts from the pound being the vehicle currency. And so you end up getting the same result. Here we did it in 2 steps. Here it's just 1 step. The same over here. And that was the quiz. So hopefully that was helpful. There's some things to clean up there, but I believe it should you should have a better understanding of it. I do want to show you something else as I'm going to share the screen again. When we talk about currency dynamics, in this situation, you typically will have 2 traders. In this case, there can be more, but in this case, it's 2. You have a U.S. exporter selling $1 million worth of goods to an English importer. So the English importer is bringing goods in. The export sales contract is drawn up in dollars. That is very crucial. So that means the British importer has to exchange their pounds for $1 million to pay the exporter. Now, they signed the contract in May at a spot rate. 1 pound equals $1.29. That's in May when they signed the contract. but payment is to be made 6 months after the date of the contract. 6 months later, when the goods are ready, when everything is all set and packaged up and ready to go, now it's time for you to pay. So the British importer has to go to the bank and they have to get $1 million US. Now, you have options. When you are purchasing goods from another partner, you have options. You can either pay now, right? If you have $1 million US, the British importer could have paid upfront before the goods were ready, 6 months before the goods are ready. And you know, taking accounting, sometimes you get discounts if you pay in advance, or if you pay early, you get a discount because that's good cash flow for the seller. So they will give you a discount. But if you don't have the money, then the only option is to pay later. Now, you have options in paying later. You can wait until 6 months later in November to say, okay, now I will go to the bank. I will draw $1 million out and pay my bill. But what is the situation here? The situation is that the exchange rate has changed from £1 equals $1.29 to now it is equal to 1.295. That 5 is significant. It's significant in the value of the contract. What impact does the new rate have on the amount of pounds required to complete the transaction? Show your calculations. So if we pull up a computer or a calculator and we want to know how many pounds do I have to pay to get the million, we can use that little trick again. Now I am converting $1 million because I want to know how many pounds I need in order to make up the 1 million. So we look at the sign here. You're trying to convert 1 million. That's dollars. But you notice that the sign here by the 1 is pounds. So what is the operation? The operation is you divide. So if you look at 1 million divided by 1.29, that is the amount of pounds you would have needed in May if you had paid immediately. Now, let's put that number to the side, and we can actually just copy it and put it to the side. Now, let's say that we decided to wait. So now, what is the difference? And we have this number here. The difference is now, since the exchange rate has changed, this is now how many pounds it requires me to make up 1 million. Because what has happened? What has happened is the pound has appreciated. So if I compare, in the beginning, I would have paid 775,193.8 pounds. In November, since I waited, I now only pay 772,200.77. Because the pound has appreciated here, that means that my pound goes further and I pay less. It's strengthened to the dollar. Now, the exporter still gets the $1 million, but you're required to pay less to get the $1 million to pay the exporter. And what this is saying is that if it is denominated in dollars, the sales contract is drawn up in dollars, that means the contract is denominated in US currency, which means the US exporter will get $1 million regardless of what happens. What is the other option? The other option for the importer, instead of waiting and not being sure of whether the pound is going to appreciate or depreciate, they can lock in the rate of exchange and they can go into a forward contract. They can go to the bank in May and say, I want to purchase $1 million, but I want it delivered in 6 months when the contract is due. The banker would then give them a 6-month forward rate for the pound. And it was going to be very different from the market rate. It's going to be, these rates are also speculated 6 months in the future. So traders are speculating what the pound will be valued 6 months into the future. And that's the value that you're getting. Now that it's the longer out the period is, the more risk that is incurred. And essentially what happens is you're going to be paying a premium in the forward market because it's amounts to insurance. Now, if the exchange rate in the forward market rate is less than today's rate, you're paying at a discount, and you would hope that's the case. But that's your other option. I actually have a video that talks about the forward market rate, and I'll be playing that. So in terms of chapter 4, I believe we've talked a lot about chapter 4, and you should have a pretty good idea of how everything works. The balance of payments, that's the inflows and outflows of a country's trade activity. Current account, you're looking at trade balances, services balances. This is your imports and exports, which happen daily at a very high volume. So this account is, you're going to be able to assess the liquidity of a country and how prosperous they are in terms of trade. The financial account or capital account is more long-term. You have your assets, you have your reserves, your gold reserves, your currency reserve, and maybe your securities that you own overseas. Here's an example of balance of payments, and on the other video, I gave you a more updated balance of payment sheet for the United States. Some of these are very old. Here is the Forex market, the spot market. The chart that I gave you, those were spot rates. The forward market is the market that I just mentioned, and the futures market is another market, which means that you are actually putting in an order for an option to buy in the future. Now, when that future point in time comes, you have an option to buy or not buy. So that is the difference. So forward market, you're putting in an order to buy, and then those will be delivered. The futures, you're putting in an option. So it's not really a purchase yet. It is an option to purchase. And you have other quotes. The bid-ask spread is the gap between the asking and buying price. Direct quotes, for example, would be if you say $1 equals 100 Xenons. Let's make up a fictitious name. The direct quote is on the Xenon because it's telling you the quantity of the currency. So the direct quote is the Xenon. So $1 equals 100 Xenon. That's a direct quote on the Xenon because we know it's 100. An indirect quote means you have the indirect quote on the dollar, which is the 1. So it is, again, we're talking about reciprocals. So if you have a direct quote, then the reciprocal of that is the indirect quote, obviously. So that's how that is viewed. The direct quote is going to be the number, the actual number of currency that is issued as it relates to 1 unit of currency. And the indirect quote is the inverse. So some of these you will see in the video, and so I will not be redundant. For chapter 5, there are some key points here, and we've talked about a number of them. You want to watch the chapter video again with all of the different elements. High context, low context, nonverbal language, backward translation. You want to have an idea of that. The impact of religion. We saw McDonald's in India, and we also saw the McDonald's in Israel with the blue and white signage. Language of culture. A lot of that is nonverbal. We saw one episode in the in that video. Aesthetics. So all these you want to check out. Make sure you remember that there are 6 elements in Hofstede's framework and what they are. You have a lot of different constructs, Gannon's, which you have a certain, many cultures are known for certain things. And so, for example, it says here French wine, German symphony, because Germans tend to be very organized and precise. You have things like Japanese quality, because you have quality standards that are very high. British house, laying the foundation, building a brick house, living in a brick house. I've never heard of that, but cultural metaphor, but apparently, there are quite a number of them. Again, I mentioned these are in the review video I did. So make sure you take a look at the review video. And chapter 6, I gave a lot more detail in terms of some cases, the differences in systems, the economic risk, the way to mitigate economic risk. I showed you a more updated list as far as how countries are ranked in terms of corruption. Transparency International. We saw an updated list that gave you a slightly different order. Types of laws, types of systems. Antitrust law against monopoly to ensure fair competition. Buyer beware, caveat emptor. Arbitration, just very, very quick on arbitration. Arbitration is not really a lawsuit. It is a situation where you try to resolve differences between two parties without going the legal route. And that is to avoid legal costs and becoming tangled up in a legal dispute. And that's actually what the WTO does. So WTO is the World Arbitration Body for Trade. Intellectual property. We saw a video at the end of the chapter video about egregious violations to patents, trademarks, and copyrights. People are copying different products. And finally, the ethics, where you have a number of concepts. And as I said, I went through this. You have these arguments about ethics: do what is right, which is the imperative, always do what is right. And that should ring true, even if it's painful. Generalization argument: do what is right, but filter action by considering consequences. And if you remember, John Lewis used to say, get into good trouble. And so during the civil rights movement, And not just the civil rights movement. There were so many different groups that were willing to put their lives on the line and break laws. These were laws that said that blacks could not sit in the restaurant. They had to go around the back, or they had to sit in the balcony if it was a movie theater, and they couldn't sit on the front of the bus. There's a lot of things they couldn't do. So getting into good trouble means breaking laws that are unjust laws. This was the struggle. And you had other groups that had totally different ideas about how that should be accomplished. Some said, well, instead of fighting to sit on the front of their buses, we should have our own bus company. We should have our own stores, our own movie theaters, our own businesses. You had different platforms of how people wanted to approach this. But of course, side by side, both had a point. You can fight for your rights in terms of gaining access to general society, but you can also build up your own economic infrastructure so that you don't necessarily have to rely on that 100% in case something should happen. It's always good to control your essentials. And then do what produces the greatest good. Those people who are in humanitarian, who like humanitarian causes would agree to that. And then you have this idea of ethics and integrity, which we all want to abide by. Whatever we do, we have to keep our integrity. There's nothing else that we have except our integrity when we're dealing in business and human relations. That's all we have. You don't want to say something and then go back on your word or do something unscrupulous, because then people will look at you a certain way. Your classmates will look at you a certain way because you lack integrity, and they will see how you deal, even in classroom settings. Oh, this person's trying to get over. Everybody's trying to get over. And the other thing is, if you're in a group setting, and let's say everybody's pulling their weight and you're not pulling yours, they're going to look at you as being unreliable and not having integrity, because you want to just have the benefit of everybody else's work without putting in your own. So you want to make sure that you always think about your integrity amongst everything else, because that's all you have. Again, corruption, the CPI, the Transparency International. I showed you another chart, a current chart. Corporate social responsibility, being a good corporate citizen. And the Enron clip that I showed you from the smartest guys in the room, and some of these other cases. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. You want to make sure that's something that you're familiar with. And that's it. So that's going to do it. That's all I'm going to talk about today. Make sure you go through the material as best you can. This video is about a class period, around 75 minutes. I do have a video that's going to follow on currency. It's going to show you the live trade. We actually saw this opening scene in class, but it also talks about other concepts in terms of how the currency exchange market evolved with the Bretton Woods agreement, and how the dollar was the backbone of the system, and it was also pegged to an amount of gold. They also talk about the short and long-term effects on money supply. And yeah, it has a lot of concepts, including currency swap, forward market, spot market, and you will certainly learn quite a bit. I'm not going to be covering any more new material, but those are concepts that you certainly want to know. Okay, so I will be putting up the exam will be ready at your class time, and then on Thursday we will continue on with our journal, and our journal will be on ethics and global business. Okay, study hard, get some good rest before you take the exam, and then I will see you on Thursday. Take care.
Every day, in trading rooms like this at Barclays Bank in New York, more than $200 billion of foreign currencies are bought and sold. Barclays is a major player in this 24-hour global market. This morning, Chief Foreign Exchange Dealer Jack Roche and Senior Dealer for Sterling Steve Leipzig were monitoring their telerate screens when the Saudis announced an increase in oil prices.
Sterling calls, please. There's oil news out. I want to buy sterling. I want to buy about 25 pounds, 60 or better.
An increase in the price of oil could raise the value of the pound. Steve and Jack decide to buy 25 million pounds, speculating that the price will rise.
Hello, my friend. Barclays, New York.
To disguise his strategy from the market, he instructs the traders of the other currencies to call out for prices.
55.60.
He buys his first 5 million pounds, then another, and with each wave of his hand, he will buy 5 million more.
5.60 here. Take 5. 59.64. No, nothing. 63. Take 5.
You got 5 here.
Take 5.
You got 5 here.
Can I get those tickets real quick?
Got 5 right here.
In less than a minute, Steve has bought 25 million pounds.
65.70.
He waits to see how the market will react.
Might see the dollar go a little bit lower on that.
Where is it now?
Got them all?
A little higher. See what comes back, Jack. Here you go, Steve.
They have guessed right. The price of sterling begins to rise.
I need a couple more calls, all right? It should be a little busy.
The pound has risen 1/10 of a cent. Steve decides it's time to take his profit. He instructs his traders to find buyers.
Nothing on 65.70.
Get higher already now. Cable, Joey?
Steve also contacts an interbank broker to get bids.
66.71.
Buyer calls begin to come in.
69.74.
71.70.
With 2 successive waves of the hand, he sells his first 10 million pounds.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll be on New York. Keep my car away, clean I'll be on New York. Get the 27. Beautiful. Thank you, Joey.
A New York broker has sold another 10 million pounds.
20 out?
Yeah.
Watch it.
I still need calls coming in. Come on.
The price has stopped rising. To preserve his profit, Steve must sell off his last 5 million quickly.
That's it, I'm out.
With another call, the broker has found a buyer for his last 5 million, and he's out.
Right.
That's it, I'm out. I'm out.
Good. 25
$32,000.
In less than 3 minutes, Barclays traders have made a profit of $32,000, buying and selling 50 million pounds.
This real-life transaction was an example of currency speculation, one way in which international businesses can participate in the foreign exchange market. Other ways international business participate in the foreign exchange market are the facilitation of international trade and investment, and the investment of spare cash in short-term money market accounts abroad. Although these 3 avenues of participation in the foreign market offer international businesses vast opportunities, adverse changes in the exchange rates can make seemingly profitable deals unprofitable, even disastrous. That's why, in today's global economy, it is absolutely critical that international businesses understand the influence of exchange rates on the profitability of trade and investment deals. The foreign exchange market is a market for converting the currency of one country into that of another country. This market has grown due to a shift away from a fixed world economy and an increase in global communications technology.
I think it's fair to say that the new technology has linked the world into virtually a single efficient capital market. New instruments and further advances in the technology will probably enhance that capability even further and mean that ultimately we're living in a world that's not only economically interdependent, but financially almost a single unit.
Government economic policies used to be subject to a system of fixed exchange rates established at the World Monetary Conference at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. If a country's trade balance went into deficit, foreign central banks would demand gold in exchange for currency. If a nation remained in deficit too long, it would lose its gold and its ability to trade with other nations. But a fixed system not permitted to be responsive to the free market was vulnerable to periodic crises. These crises took the form of sudden devaluations.
The British government today devalued the pound by 14.3%, not only rocking the international financial community, but sending interest rates in London up 2 full points in one day. The devaluation
The
was seen as
reverberations
another
of the
defeat for Labour
devaluation
government.
echoed throughout the free world. Other nations whose economies were closely linked to Great Britain's devalued their currencies as well. The world of fixed exchange rates finally fell apart when the dollar itself, the backbone of the system, could no longer command the confidence of the international financial community.
I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve.
I was there at the
assets,
time in the government in 1970 and 71 when this thing became acute, and we were considering even stronger measures such as imposing quotas on imports from Japan in order to defend the dollar. So it was at that point that it was decided that rather than put the economy and the whole world economy through such a ringer in order to avoid all these interferences with international trade and capital movements, the thing was just to let the dollar go down.
I am determined that the
Nixon
American
called his
dollar
action
must
at the
never
time a
again
technical
be a
one to stabilize the sinking dollar.
international
But in fact, he had lowered the curtain on the era of fixed exchange rates. Yet even amidst the turmoil of the currency crises, no one was certain that one era had ended and another just begun.
In the 1960s, the foreign exchange traders that I knew then relied awfully heavily for their information on the morning newspaper when they read on the train on the way to work. And if there were not a currency crisis in Britain or France or someplace like that, they might read, there would be a news ticker somewhere in their office that they might look at occasionally, but there was no heavy demand for information about where the market was because the price was fixed.
The market was a totally different market. We did not trade between banks here in New York. We only used to use brokers. We used to trade with our correspondents abroad via telex machines. To make a direct phone call overseas, it used to take probably a half hour because you had to go through the operator. Direct dialing did not exist. With technology today, you can buy $50 million in a matter of 20 seconds.
By early 1973, governments had lost the ability to set the price of their currency. With the majority of the money held in the market in private hands, central banks were no longer the force they were in the 60s. That power had shifted to the traders.
I don't think anyone in the financial industry could have been sitting here 10 years ago and anticipated the dramatic changes that have occurred in technology, in deregulation, and in internationalization of financial markets. It has been a booming industry, not just booming financially, but in terms of innovations, in terms of new ideas and new techniques.
As the foreign currency market has grown, it has also become more complex, creating a need for different exchange rates. Spot exchange rates are the standard rates at which a foreign exchange dealer converts one currency to another on a particular day. This rate is necessary to execute transactions immediately, but is not always the most favorable rate. A forward exchange rate is an exchange rate that governs future or long-term transactions. The rate locks in a rate of exchange for future use. This rate is agreed upon by both parties in the transaction and is based on expectations of what the market will do over the time period agreed upon. Another way to control rates of future transactions is by using a currency swap. A currency swap allows a business to simultaneously purchase and sell a given amount of foreign exchange for two different value dates. Currency swaps are used between international businesses and their banks, between banks, and between governments when it's desirable to move out of one currency into another for a limited period of time. Because large amounts of money and profit depend upon future exchange rates, it's imperative that international business understand the forces that determine these rates. Three things affect a country's long-run exchange rate movements. They are the growth in a country's money supply, the inflation rate of the country, and the nominal interest rates of that country. If any of these things are growing at a rapid rate, international business should take precautions when dealing with that country. While these factors have more of an impact on long-term rate exchanges, short-term movements may be due to other factors. Some of these are transportation costs, trade barriers such as tariffs, and psychological factors such as bandwagon effects among traders in the market. Besides the risk of future rates changing unfavorably for a business, there are other risks involved when dealing with the foreign exchange market. One such risk is that governments sometimes restrict currency convertibility, much like the Soviet Union had done in the past. One way businesses can cope with this problem is to engage in counter-trading. Counter-trading is a barter agreement between international businesses that involves the trading of goods and services for other goods and services. All of these factors are examples of how the foreign exchange market has grown more and more complex over the past 25 years. Modern technology, such as computers and satellites, have given rise to a volatile global marketplace where changes can occur instantaneously. Adverse changes in the market can have an overwhelming effect on international business deals, turning apparently profitable deals into highly unprofitable ones. Understanding the foreign exchange market is absolutely critical to the success of modern international business. By understanding the risks of the foreign exchange market and the different ways to protect against these risks, international businesses can not only survive, but thrive in today's world economy.